All right, welcome back to week 4 mindset and worldview. And in this section, we're going to show you how to use your brain instead of your brain using you. So, just like in the last section when we talked about Elon Musk with the algorithm, let's show you how to program your algorithm so that way the world becomes more of what you want and less of what you don't want. Who's up for that? Okay, so let's do this. What exactly is mindset? Because, like I said before, people just say, oh, fix your mindset, fix your mindset. Think positive. Thinking positive, whatever, it doesn't really help. Here's what mindset and worldview is specifically. So, mindset and worldview are your thoughts, your beliefs, and your values. So, mindset and worldview, I've broken it down into 3 main categories. Mindset is your thoughts, your beliefs, and your values. And in each of these, there are some subsections. So I'm going to explain to you what those are. So under your thoughts, so section 1 for thoughts, you have your internal dialogue. You have your internal dialogue. You have your mental pictures, and you have metaphors and symbols. You have internal dialogue, you have mental pictures, and you have metaphors and symbols. So in most people, not in everybody, but so people experience the world through what? They experience the world through their 5 senses. So sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. The 5 senses. What some people call that is visual, auditory, kinesthetic. So visual, auditory, kinesthetic. Visual is sights, so pictures. Auditory is sound, so internal dialogue, like talking to yourself in your head. And kinesthetic is more like internal feelings, gut reactions, like knowing, right? Does that make sense? We'll talk more about the kinesthetics and the gut reactions more in the energy portion of things. But for the most part, people represent the world through internal pictures, through internal dialogue, or through metaphors and symbols of some kind. So to give you an example, a metaphor and symbols, that could be like, oh man, I'm just hitting the brick wall. I keep trying to make progress and I'm hitting the brick wall. Well, when they say they're hitting a brick wall, what they're actually explaining there is in the kinesthetics and the feeling and the internal feeling, there's a feeling that says that they can't move forward. So let's break this down. There's thoughts, there's beliefs, and there's values. And in each one of these categories, there are 3 subcategories. So for your thoughts, you have your internal dialogue, you have your mental pictures or mental movies, and you have metaphors and symbols. So you have your internal dialogue, you have your mental pictures or mental movies, and you have metaphors and symbols. I'm going to explain this one level deeper for you here in a moment. So when you experience the world, what you're experiencing the world through is your sights, through what you hear, through what you feel and touch, through your smell, and through your taste in most cases. Make sense? The 5 senses. Most people primarily filter the world through their visual sights, through their auditory sounds, or through their kinesthetics, which is their feelings, their gut response. It's what they perceive in their body. Okay? So internal dialogue relates to the auditory senses. Mental pictures, mental movies relates to the visual senses, and metaphors and symbols relates to your kinesthetics. I'll explain to you what I mean. So in a metaphor, what you might hear somebody say is, I'm trying to make progress, but I feel like I'm stuck in the mud, or I feel like I'm hitting up against a brick wall. Now, they're not really hitting a brick wall, right? But metaphorically they are. Why? Why do they say that? Because they internally feel a blockage. And it's not a real blockage out there in the world. There's a block in their kinesthetic system, in their feeling system, in their gut response. And they feel like they can't move forward. Does that make sense? That's a feeling. So that's your metaphors. Your mental pictures, everybody has mental movies they play in their head, or many people do. Some people, this is a little bit underdeveloped. Some people primarily use this. But what'll happen is don't think of a pink elephant. That's what everybody says. So that's the pictures you see, that's the movies you play, that's what you're playing in your head over and over and over again in your mind. Your brain can't tell the difference between what's vividly imagined and reality. Because when you play a mental picture or a mental movie, just like when you're in a dream, right? you will have a physical response to the dream as if it's real. Because when you're playing the mental pictures, it still fires off the same like brain chemistry, and you'll have the same chemical reaction in your body. So that's why if you're dreaming and you feel and you see like an image of you falling, you'll jolt up. You'll jolt awake. Or if you see like a train coming at you in the dream, you'll jolt awake because your body responds to it as if it's real. So when you're playing these mental images in your head daily, you're responding to it as if it's real. Does that make sense? And then so your thoughts is your internal dialogue, which is what you're saying to yourself in your head all day long. I suck. This is never going to work. I don't know how this is going to happen. This is what I believe. So you're talking to yourself all the time. Can you see how these can be positive or negative? Right? Okay, so let's leave it there for now. Now we have beliefs. And beliefs are, you have a couple of categories. You have your global beliefs, which is, life is, people are, all women are. So what it is it makes a broad generalization. You have category specific beliefs. So money is difficult, relationships are fun, career is difficult. You see, so you have these category specific beliefs. And you have situation specific beliefs. So I can't talk to this girl at the bar because this. Does that make sense? So you have global beliefs, beliefs about life, the world, what things mean, category specific. So money, relationships, health, career. Situational specific beliefs. So in certain circumstances, I can't do this because, but maybe you can do it in a different context. And then so now we have values, which is the third level, and we'll cover values more next week. It requires a different section. But to give you an example of what values are, they're incredibly important because this is what a value is, what you greatly consider the most important stuff in your life. So it's what you move towards, meaning what you think is going to give you pleasure or what you want. So it's what you're moving towards. It's what you're moving away from. So trying to avoid pain, disappointment, certain situations. And it also has your personal rule book on when to feel good, to feel bad, to do certain things. Okay, so values are incredibly important. We're going to talk more about these next week. But for the sake of today, we're going to talk about thoughts and beliefs. So each of these categories, your thoughts, your beliefs, and your values, have two components. They have a conscious component in your conscious mind. And so your conscious mind is something it's your active mind, logic and reasoning, rationale. It's your thinking mind. So think of it kind of like a computer processor. So your computer processor is your short-term memory or your RAM. So your conscious mind is what you have access to. But your computer only has so much access to memory to run programs at a time, right? Otherwise, it has to go into background processing. So your brain can only really focus on maybe 7 to 10 things at a time consistently. Make sense? Everything else goes into the unconscious mind. And the unconscious mind is background processing. So the unconscious mind does a few things. Number one is it's supposed to keep you alive. So if you had to beat your heart consciously while thinking of 7 to 10 things consciously, it would be overwhelming. So your unconscious mind is breathing you, it's beating your heart, and sometimes it's counterproductive because your conscious mind says it wants something, but the unconscious mind is trying to keep you alive. So you're like, I want to go do this thing, and your body's like, no, that's dangerous. So you come up against yourself. That's when you hit that brick wall. Make sense? So it puts common things, though, into autopilot as a shortcut. So just like on a computer, you're always using a certain program. Well, you don't want to go into start, file, run, type in CC, semicolon, this. You just put a little icon there, you click it once, and then it fires off. So things that you do frequently, things that you do often, become a desktop shortcut. So you tie your shoe, if you had to consciously go, okay, loop it, swoop it, pull it, it would be a lot. But after a while, you just do it. Think of this. Have you ever had an alarm system or garage code or a keypad or like a key tone that you got to type in a number? At first, you have to consciously think about, okay, 508, 793, and then you do it a bunch of times, right? But after a while, isn't it possible, or have you ever experienced this, where you don't even consciously remember the number? Like, oh my God, what's the number? What's the number? I can't think of it. And you go, let me just type it. And then you let your body do it, and it's right. That's your unconscious mind taking over your conscious mind, okay? This happens all the time. So your unconscious mind is like long-term memory and storage, and sometimes you don't even need to have your conscious mind aware of things to have your unconscious be working. Does that make sense? Who here follows me with this? So this is giving you the overview of how this whole thing works. So now, how the unconscious and conscious minds work. The conscious mind can only process about 7 to 10 things at a time consciously. That's why phone numbers are mostly about 10 digits. Everything else gets filtered out, or else you'd be completely overwhelmed. So imagine this. You go to a restaurant and you're focused on somebody and you're focused on the person you're talking to. If you heard the conversation next to you and the waiter and the phone ringing and the air conditioner, and then you were manually gauging the temperature, and then you saw the person in the background, like your brain would just get overstimulated. So what your brain does a really good job of is filtering everything out, only focus on about 10 things. Okay? The unconscious mind processes everything else that the conscious can't. And it's selecting which bits of information are important to focus on for the conscious mind. Based on what? Based on your algorithm. So because your conscious mind can only focus on about 7 to 10 things, your unconscious mind goes, what's important? Let's bring that to his conscious awareness. So that's why you start to see some of the same things happen. Are you beginning to see where this is going? So the unconscious mind, just like the algorithm, is selecting what to present to the conscious mind for analysis. And so this is why Carl Jung, the famous philosopher, the famous psychologist, he goes, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll call it fate, because your unconscious programming has been selected on autopilot and it's consciously sorting to present stuff to your conscious mind. So unless you clean up the projection of what your unconscious mind is looking for, you're going to keep seeing the same things over and over and over again, like Groundhog's Day. Does that make sense? As a matter of fact, to the extent that your thoughts, beliefs, and values are not conscious or deliberate, you will be affected by your past conditioning or others choosing for you. Let me say that again. As a matter of fact, to the extent that your thoughts, beliefs, and values are not conscious or deliberate, meaning you don't consciously choose them, you will be affected by your past conditioning or by others choosing for you, meaning others choosing what you're going to do for you or who you are. Does that make sense? And do you remember what the best definition of a high value man is, right? Let's go back to week 1. The best definition of a high value man is a man who is in control of the direction of his own life, who is in control of his own outcomes. So the best definition of a high value man, right? It's not a strategy. It's not pickup lines. It's not, all these stupid things like be a jerk or do this or do that. The best way to be a high value man is personal development, period. Because a high value man who is in control of what he's perceiving, is control of his perceptions, that's the guy who's dangerous. In a good way. Does that make sense? So let's take a second now, and I want to give you an overview of how the unconscious mind actually works, because not a lot of people know this. People know, there's a conscious, there's an unconscious, there's a subconscious, but how does it work? And it's kind of like this mystical thing. So I want to explain to you in summary the top 10 processes of the unconscious mind. So number 1, the primary job of the unconscious mind is to run and to preserve the body. So it's to run and to preserve the body, meaning it's going to breathe you, it's going to beat your heart, it's going to regulate your temperature. Does that make sense? But also it wants to run and preserve your body. It's also going to not allow you to put yourself in a situation that's perceived dangerous. And that doesn't mean just avoid the saber-toothed tiger. That means I'm going to avoid public speaking because it makes me have a fight or flight response. You see? That's how it works. It's also going to store and organize your memories. So all of your memories, your unconscious mind is a recording device. It's storing everything. And you can only really consciously hold on to 7 or 10 things, but all of that stuff is available to you in the recording device of your unconscious mind. Sounds crazy, but you'd be surprised how many people go, oh my God, I remembered something when I was 3. And it changes everything, right? Your unconscious mind is always on. It's always recording. It's highly literal. It takes directions. It follows direct orders. So for example, it's highly literal, follows direct orders, and take a look at the last one. It can't process a negative. So I'm going to skip ahead. So it's literal, it takes orders, can't process a negative. Did you know that the most instances of slip and fall accidents, like at a shopping mall or something like that, is where the big yellow sign is that says don't slip? Okay, why does that happen? Because the yellow sign does what? Draws your attention, and then it says don't, and the unconscious mind can't process a negative, and it's highly literal and takes directions and follows orders. So it sees the yellow sign, gets its attention, and it goes, oh, I need to slip, and you slip. They changed the sign to be careful or watch where you walk, and the slip and falls reduced dramatically. So that's what I mean by it's highly literal and takes directions. It maintains and controls all your perceptions. So what they say is perception is reality. Perception, they also say, is projection. So whatever you see in the outside world is a projection of what you believe. But your perceptions are coming from where? From your unconscious mind, what you select as important. It also works on the principle of least effort. So whatever can help you burn the least amount of calories, take the least amount of effort, that's what the unconscious mind wants to do. It responds with instinct and habit. So once it gets into your nervous system, once it gets into your unconscious, it's going to create that shortcut that we talked about. So you're going to habitually start to respond to things in an instinctual way, sometimes without even thinking about it. You can get control of this, but it takes a little while. You need repetition for building habits. Okay, so your instinct and your habit, which you're unconsciously responding with, it's got programmed and installed through years and years and years of repetition. So to undo that, you need repetition in the opposite direction to build a new habit, to build a new perception. Okay? It's also highly symbolic and metaphorical. Take a look at the world of the dreams. When you fall asleep, everything is metaphorical. It's like, oh, I saw a snake and he shed his skin and then he ate a bowling ball, right? Like, it's crazy. And then what that might mean unconsciously is you're about to reach the next level in your life because you're shedding a layer of skin and you're growing in the next version of yourself. So your brain is highly symbolic, highly metaphorical. And in another sense, what I talked about in the last section, I feel like I'm hitting a brick wall. Your unconscious can understand that because the brick wall, it's like the brick wall, the metaphor itself is a shortcut to understanding. So your unconscious loves to make things into metaphors and symbols, and it takes everything personally. And it cannot process a negative, like I said before. So those are the top 10 processes of the unconscious mind. And so how do these mental models get formed? How does your unconscious get formed? Well, whatever tends to get in there first tends to be what sticks. So whatever tends to get in there first and is conditioned tends to be what sticks. So there's a guy I really like. He's huge into psychology. He's a teacher. His name is David Snyder. He says, if you raise a child and as his parent, you tell him that a circle is really a square. So this child sees a circle and you say, that's a square. This child has no frame of reference for that circle being anything else other than a square, right? And because you're his parent, you're like the authority figure, he's going to believe it. So when that child goes to kindergarten and you've repeated over and over and over, hey, this circle is really a square or that's a square, he identifies it. The teacher in kindergarten, first grade says, hey, everybody, we're going to teach you the shapes. This is a circle. The child says, no, it's not. That's a square. And the child believes it. And he's going to argue, right? He's going to argue because daddy said so. So what gets in there first is very, very important. And by the way, am I only talking about circles and squares? No, it happens with everything. It happens with your beliefs about life. It happens with your beliefs about money, about relationships, about what your health is going to be, about what's possible in terms of your self-concept, everything. So here's what happens. Here's how your worldview gets formed. There's a first event. So think of it kind of like a timeline. So that line from left to right, that's from your past to your future, that's your life. All of those dots along the way are events, just regular events. And so the first initial event is where you hear a certain piece of information. So initial event happens, you hear some information, the information makes sense, or it processes through and you make a decision based on that information. And good news, you survive because you're still alive. Your brain goes, okay, the information was accurate. Okay, that's a good strategy. And it creates a shortcut because of the principle of least effort. Okay, that situation happened. I got that information. That makes sense to me in my mind as a 3-year-old or whatever. And you go, I'm going to do more of that. So then a second event happens. And your brain goes into the memory bank and it finds, well, where did something like this happen before? And it goes, oh, the first event happened. Did I survive? Yeah, it worked pretty well. So it sees that you survived or it worked out, or at the very least nothing bad happened. And it goes, I'm going to do that strategy again. And it runs it again. And then a third event happens. And you go into your memory bank, your unconscious mind goes, well, where in the past did I encounter something similar? And by the way, it can even be like a different scenario, but just close enough. And now it starts to generalize, right? And you go, where in the past did I encounter this? What information did I learn? What can I pull out and use? Principle of least effort. And it goes, oh, well, it was successful before. I'm still alive. I'm going to do more of that. So you do it a third time. And pretty soon you start doing it 3, 4, 5 times. This becomes a wired and installed habit. It becomes an unconscious program running your life. And so from that point on, you're basically running on autopilot until you consciously decide to shift it. But so think of the implications of this. After a while, you're not operating from the actual present moment. You're not operating from actual reality in front of you. You're operating basically off of a hologram of the past reality. Does that make sense? You're operating based off of what worked in the past. So remember when we talked about the conscious mind and the unconscious mind? So the unconscious mind is kind of like that algorithm that Elon Musk talks about. And so once something goes into the unconscious mind, your unconscious mind begins to sort for that thing. And it starts to look for that situation out in the environment. And so this is called your reticular activating system. So remember when I said whatever you put your attention and focus on, you get more of. So whatever you put your attention and focus on is what you deem to be important information, and then it goes into the unconscious mind. So the reticular activating system is the part of your brain like a servo mechanism. It's like a homing missile. So what it's doing is it's sorting for more of that, since your unconscious considers that important. And then now, from now on, until you change it, the 7 to 10 bits of information that's consciously making it into your awareness is more of what your algorithm already gives it based on the past. You completely miss out and delete everything else that's available. Does that make sense? I'm going to tell you an example of how this works. You ever meet your partner? Maybe you're in a relationship or you've been in a relationship and you meet someone for the first time and it's new. And the honeymoon phase, you're like, I'm trying to figure this person out and it's so cool and everything's new and fresh and amazing. Well, why is that? Because your brain doesn't have any reference for this person yet. So every time you see this person, you're seeing them with fresh eyes. What are they going to do? What are they going to say? How are they going to react? And the things that, maybe annoy you now didn't annoy you at all before, right? Because you're just open to experiencing them as they are. But as you got more familiar with them, what happened is your brain started to focus and fixate on certain parts of them. And so now your brain is like, well, she always does this. She always does that. She always talks about this. I hate it when she does that. And so now your brain creates a mental image of that person. And so now you're not even reacting to the person anymore. Now you're reacting to the mental image that you locked in place. And so you're reacting to an illusion of them. Does that make sense? That's why the intimacy sometimes goes away, or that's sometimes why the honeymoon phase goes away. It's because you're no longer seeing this person as like an infinite possibility of what they could become. Does that make sense? So sometimes do your best to see that person with fresh eyes. Maybe it'll help you out a little bit. Just a quick tip. But so here's how the mind works. It's a very, very brief analysis. It's very, very simplistic, but it's workable. So the conscious mind is very, very analytical. It's very, very powerful, and it does a really good job of stuff. But it can only do about 7 to 10 processes at a time, or else it would overload. We talked about when you go to dinner with a friend. You get tunnel vision, don't you? And you only hear your friend because the background noise would be overwhelming. So your brain filters out every bit of irrelevant, quote unquote, information to keep your sanity. Make sense so far? So here's how it works. Once your decision about the world, goes into the unconscious, goes into that reticular activating system. Information comes in. It hits your brain, and just like in the restaurant, it filters out irrelevant information. And so what's considered irrelevant? Anything that doesn't go along with the original assumptions or decisions or the algorithm that you've set up in the past. Does that make sense? And it comes in through your visual, auditory, and kinesthetic sense. So your brain now, once it comes in, your brain deletes and distorts and generalizes information. So it deletes information, it distorts the information, or it generalizes the information accordingly to that 7 to 10 bits of information. So you're filtering your experience to sort for what you're unconsciously already looking for. And then, so once it goes through your brain, you then respond to it by creating a meaning of what the experience meant. But you're not experiencing objective outside reality. Once your algorithm is set, you're experiencing the way you filter reality. So I'll say that again. You're not experiencing actual outside objective reality. You're experiencing the way you filter reality. And then you think you have no control. You think just fate is directing things. You think you have bad luck. You think bad things always happen to you. But you're just experiencing your own filters until you decide to take control of your perceptions. That's why they say the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. It's not because of fairness or equality or that poor people don't deserve wealth. It simply comes down to, and I hope this doesn't offend anybody, because if people have been in a bad situation for a while, this puts the responsibility on the person. But it comes down to the way they sort information. Rich people sort for opportunity. They see ways to create wealth. Poor people usually sort for, hey, here's how it's not going to work for me. It just comes down to a matter of perception. And so it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. And people repeat their own thoughts and their own worldview over and over and over and over again in their head, either through internal pictures or internal dialogue. And it creates almost like this hypnotic loop, doesn't it? Or like an auto-suggestion. So you ever walk around the house saying, oh my God, I can't find my keys anywhere. Where are my keys? Why can I never find my keys? And they're right on the hook in front of you, but can you see them? You can't. Why can't you? Because you're using auto-suggestion or a mini form of self-hypnosis on repetition against yourself. I can't see the keys. I don't know where they are. Why can I never find my keys? And your brain, 7 to 10, sorts for information where you can't find your keys. It's a very, very simple form of mantra. Does that make sense? So here's how it works. Your thoughts create an internal dialogue or a mental picture. Your internal dialogue or your mental picture controls your focus. Your focus determines what information comes into your awareness or doesn't, which then controls and directs the actions you take, the decisions you make, and the results you get. So your thoughts create an internal dialogue or mental picture. Your internal dialogue or mental picture controls your focus. Your focus determines which information comes into your awareness or doesn't, which then controls and directs the actions you take, the decisions you make, and the results you get. Who here's following so far? So going back to this, your brain works in the form of mental images or metaphors. So just like we have internal dialogue, which controls our focus, we also create these internal images or metaphors. So for example, Bill Buckner, right? He said he's afraid that the ball's going to go through his leg. That was his dominant mental picture. And he put intense focus on that image to the point where he even said it out loud to himself. He repeated it out loud to himself in a public interview. So if he said it out loud in the interview, what was he saying on his phone to his wife or to his teammates? Did he say that out loud a couple more times? We don't know, right? But it was a negative mental rehearsal. So he imagined himself letting the ball go through his legs so strong that was his dominant picture. So when the time came when he mentally rehearsed that, that's what happened. And your brain also works in metaphors. So for example, how differently do you think your life would be if you symbolized it as, hey, life is a party? Or what do you think if you thought life is this amazing school where I learn a lot of lessons? It'd be an entirely different experience, wouldn't it? Or what about life is a 12-round fight for survival? Will these metaphors control the quality and perceptions of somebody's life and what they sort for? It happens all the time. I was actually speaking with somebody one time who was complaining. And they said, hey, I just have extreme fatigue, extreme burnout all the time. He's an incredibly high achiever, but he keeps burning out. And so when he's talking with me, he keeps using these metaphors. He's like, man, I just got knocked down, but I'm standing up to fight another day. I'm in the corner right now, but I got rocked, but I got the bruises. I'm gonna take the punches. I'm gonna keep getting knocked down, but I'm not down for the 10. And I kept asking him, like, hey man, can I ask you a question? He goes, what? He goes, I go, what's life for you? I go, tell me what's your metaphor for life? He goes, well, life is a fight for survival, man. It's like 14 rounds. And I said, have you ever considered, no wonder why you're exhausted all the time. I wonder why you created your life as a metaphor for a boxing match. It's like, oh, well, hey man, I grew up in the Bronx. It was a tough neighborhood and I just had to fight to survive. And so that was his experience, right? And it's totally cool. But would it make sense now as to why he's experiencing burnout? Because he's no longer in the Bronx. He lives in Florida. But he's always burnt out because he's experiencing life as everything he does. Going to the store, paying for groceries, everything's a fight. It's all survival all day long. Would you be exhausted fighting for survival all day long? Absolutely. So he changed his metaphor, and you'd be surprised just how quickly the overwhelm went away. Okay? So for this lesson, here's what to do on a super high level. I'm going to put the ball in your court here for a moment. What I'd like you to do is to begin constructing mental images of what you want and picture them completing successfully. So begin to construct mental images of what you want and picture them completing successfully. Focus on what you want, not what you don't want. And then so change your metaphors for life. Just notice, what have they been up until this point? What have your metaphors for life been up until this point? What's been good or useful about these metaphors? What's been good or useful about these metaphors? What could having these metaphors for life potentially cost you? And what could it benefit you to change your metaphors potentially? What could it benefit you to change your metaphors potentially? And then so create a new metaphor or rework it so it starts to support you. So what I'd like to do here is we're going to take some time after this session is over. We got a couple more sessions to go here for this mindset section. But I want you to just take a moment and take a notebook, take a pen, and just think for a minute. And just think, what have some of my mental images been? What's been some of my internal dialogue? What's that been? Is it supporting me or is it not supporting me? How am I constantly saying stuff like, I don't know where the keys are? How are you potentially constantly hypnotizing yourself towards what you don't want? And just get some awareness of that. And then really make a commitment to start constructing mental images or internal dialogue about what you want, not what you don't want, and completing things successfully. And then so take a little bit more time and see what your metaphors for life have been. Notice what they have been in the past. And notice, hey, it's probably been really good for you in some cases. That guy that's always thought of life as a fight for survival, he's probably had to overcome some really tough challenges, hasn't he? So it's really helped him, which is why he's held it for so long. So what's been good or useful about that metaphor that's helped him or helped you? But what could that metaphor, or what could holding on to it, what could that potentially cost you? And what could it benefit you to change it? If you were to change it, what could it benefit you to change it? And then so start creating a new metaphor or rework it so it supports you in what you want to achieve. Okay, who's up for that? So in the next section, we're going to talk about beliefs. So it's going to be an awesome session. I'll see you then.